But before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on my time on the board. I joined the Medical Board of California in 2012, and over the intervening years, I've had the privilege of working with a tremendously dedicated staff and board members. I want to thank all of them for their efforts in serving our mission of healthcare consumer protection. As I wrap up my 3 terms as president, I'm reflecting on all that we've faced and achieved, as well as the issues we continue to address. Shortly after I joined the board, we began to deal with the realities of skyrocketing abuse of prescription opioid medications and the resulting national health crisis. And we were finishing this last term managing the impact of COVID-19 and planning for the integration of healthcare and technology, as we've just discussed. In between, we've accomplished a lot while I've been here, and I'd like to take this moment to shine a spotlight on some of those achievements since I've been on the board. In 2013, we were the first board to use teleconferencing to address the consumer access issue during our board meetings. We dramatically improved our website, which was named #1 most user-friendly site by the U.S. Consumer Products. With the introduction of the Medical Board California app, we became, again, the only state medical board with their own licensing notification app, and at this point, we still are. We launched the Look Up Your Doctor's License campaign, which is still ongoing. We're just not able to do the physical outreach events that we were doing before, but we will resume those. We introduced patient advocate talks, which I hope those will continue after my term. And we went to the state capitol for Legislation Day, something that other boards had not initiated, to educate the legislators about the board and its processes and mission. And this has become an annual pilgrimage. And I'm hoping during this virtual environment that we can look at doing a Ledge Day virtually in the coming months. But one of the most important pieces of legislation during my term was the Patients' Right to Know Act of 2018, known as SB 1448, which took effect last year. Along with the other work listed that I've just mentioned, this act helped us greatly improve our communications and transparency. I am also proud that we responded when in 2017 we received the demographics of disciplinary action by the Medical Board of California for the years of 2003 and 2013. As an observational report conducted by the California Research Bureau that revealed alarming racial disparities. We responded immediately by convening a task force, conducted a review of existing investigation complaints and disciplinary processes, then engaged in relevant policymakers to ensure that the board had adequate funding and/or legislative support for the recommended changes. We mandated annual implicit bias training for board staff, members, investigators, attorneys at the Attorney General's office, and the judges that preside over our cases. This training program, as well as ongoing examination of areas of concern, will continue under the new board's direction. Susan Lauren, Eric Andrus, Marianne Hollingsworth, and Michelle Mazerat Ramos, we see you, we hear you, and you have helped us. I think we can do better together in more gentler ways, and I hope you consider sometimes a new approach in working with the board in the future. To all my board members, I will miss you tremendously, and I hope that we stay in contact. So now I would like to ask for nominations for president, and I'm going to move forward with nominating Dr. Ron Lewis.
Second.
Are there any additional nominations?
I would like to nominate Christina Lawson.
Are there any additional nominations? We have 2 nominations, Dr. Ron Lewis and Ms. Christina Lawson. Nominations are now closed. I will now ask for a vote. Ms. Codwell?
May I don't know if it's appropriate. Can I ask a question at this point about the process, Ms. Pines? So my question is, there's an executive committee, and I respect both of the nominees for the office of presidency. I just want to have an idea about what happens at a last. I know Ron's been on that executive committees and been in meetings and been involved. What actually happens then?
What happens in the meetings?
Yeah, I mean, is it an important educational process that occurs when someone like Dr. Lewis has been involved on the executive committee, involved in meetings on a regular basis, meeting with the staff and the executive director? Is this a question? Does that matter or does it not matter? What happens?
I
need to restate that, or?
No, I understand the question. Yes, both the president and the vice president role is very important. It's very integral. We work with the staff on a regular basis. Very specifically, the president does very continuously. The vice president is the person sort of prepped and ready to take over that position if that's the position that they are elected to. So yes, I would say, very, very involved.
Ms. Pine?
Yes.
Dr. I'm just wondering, for the process, do we also ask the president nominee whether they would accept the nomination before we vote?
Yes, I was just going to move in that direction because based on listening to Dr. Hawkins' question, I think that might be appropriate. I'm going to start with Dr. Ron Lewis. He was the first to be nominated. Dr. Lewis, would you accept this nomination to be president of the Medical Board of California?
I will most heartily accept the nomination to be president of the MBC and moving it in through sunset.
Thank you. Ms. Christina Lawson, will you accept the nomination of president of the Medical Board of California?
So I guess let me start by saying I'm a little bit surprised by this nomination because we've got, somewhat of a process in place for our leadership roles. But I guess I want to acknowledge and recognize that there is significance in having a public member of this board be part of the leadership team of the board, and part of the formal leadership structure of the board, especially as we proceed through sunset. Of course, President Pines, you've done a terrific job as a public member leading this board for the past 3 years and then even prior. So I guess what I would say is that if the board thinks it's important for a public member to, in advancing the board's mission and then in leading the sunset process, if the board thinks that it's important for a public member to be part of that process, I'm willing to serve the board in one of these key leadership positions. I know we have 3, the president, the vice president, and the secretary. And I'm hedging a little bit, perhaps because of my surprise with this process, but I think maybe it's worth a conversation about whether we want to maintain the same type of balance that we've had to date. And that I think, and if memory serves me correct, Denise, you were the vice president during our previous sunset process. with Dr. Gananadev leading that. So I guess I'm sort of returning the question, which is, if we think that's an important thing to consider.
Can
I think it's an important thing to consider. We have historically had this as a process. I think to have fair representation of both voices that we all sort of represent. Even the terms before that was Mr. Sereno and Dr. Gananadev, and the term before that was exactly the same way. I think that changing precedent now, when actually that's a good precedent, I think is worthy of a discussion with the members at this point. So I'm going to open it up for dialogue, and I think I heard Mr. Watkins wanting to intervene.
I chose Miss Lawson because she has the presence that is somewhat like Miss Pines.
Mm-hmm.
She has the temperament, she has the attorney skills, and I think that if we do the sunset review, she will have the necessary skills to address that panel in a way that will be effective, as she has done on this board many a times. And I think that in the climate that we are living in, to not have it be representative of, and I don't want to say in line with a women's movement, but that is a consideration for me, that the board needs to represent a new way. And as much as I love and respect Ron, I think to further the cause of the board, she's the one that came to mind if we can't have Miss Pines. And so I thought about this a lot, and I've been through the sunset review process, and I know how important it is when you appear in front of that panel and suddenly they see two doctors, or they see two, excuse my reference to race, but two white males, and the board is already at this time demonized for being patriarchal. And so I think if we want to break through all of that and have a fresh new look and a fresh new start, then Ms. Lawson represents that. And that is the reason why I chose her. I chose it solely at the best thing that I could think, that if I was going to make a decision for the board in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This is Howard, may I speak?
Yes, Dr. Krause.
If you think about it, we really are a very fortunate body. Granted, we have some new members, but I think every member of our board could serve this board well as president or vice president. Furthermore, regarding the balance between physicians and the lay public, that certainly is the makeup of our board. But the other thing I've observed in my 7 years on the board is that when we're behind closed doors in our panel meetings, sometimes the physicians are more harsh in their criticism of the doctors who were being considered for discipline than is the lay public. So I often hear that doctors are on the board to protect doctors, but my experience on this board is that's absolutely not the case, that every member of this board is here to protect the public. Regarding a balance in leadership, there are no rules in our bylaws or in the law regarding the necessity of having one physician and one non-physician in leadership positions. And if we look back over the history of the organization, it hasn't always been divided in that way. For 2 years, when Barbara Yaroslavsky was in leadership, the vice president was an attorney. And 2 years before that, there were two positions in leadership. So the good news is I think that we're all interchangeable and we're all very well qualified. So I wouldn't want the members of the board to think that there needs to be this yin and yang leadership ladder that must always alternate between MD and non-MD. We're really looking for people who are committed to do the work. There's an incredible amount of extra work that a member of this board imposes upon him or herself in accepting a leadership position. And any one of us who are committed to doing that is eligible and welcome to be in that position. Thank you.
Thank you. And I concur with what you're saying. It's the commitments of the individuals that's really most important. Are there any members with any additional comments before I go to the public?
Yeah, Ms. Pines, I think
Yes.
as one of the senior members, it is important to have I look at the three positions in the executive committee, that is the president, vice president, and secretary. And most often we'll have two as the physicians and one as a non-physician, and two as non-physicians, one as physicians. It has been that way since I got on the board in December of 2011. And I can tell you, I love both candidates, Christine and Ron. And the only thing is that sometimes gaining experience as a vice president adds value. I did that with David Serrano Sewell, and you did that with me when we went there. So that's I just wanted to let the board know. As far as I'm concerned, having one of the having all three doctors up there is bad. Having all three non-physicians is bad. So I think we're okay. We'll decide.
Okay. Any additional comments from members?
Denise, may I ask a question? May I ask a question? Is there
Yes.
any reason why we couldn't take all nominations as one, or think about what the compositions? I don't know if it would matter to the board or not. More like a slate, or do we need to do these one by?
We have to do them one. We have to do them one by one. I understand what you're recommending, but we have to do them one by one.
Okay, let me ask you something. Can we go from secretary to the vice president to the president, or do we have to go from president, vice president to the secretary?
Well, we've already started a process right now that we're kind of in, and because members have weighed in at this point, we now have to go to the public comments.
I just finish my comment is
yes.
I do know who I was going to nominate for secretary, so I just want to let you know that at this time. Thank you.
Okay.
My final point, quickly, is Ms. Lawson's experience on this board and professional experience, and also is all of these elements that I have observed. And even though it is true that any one of us can serve in any of these positions, I think when you add up the experience, the presence, and when you add up this ridiculous outside notion of what the political optics are with regard to board compositions that became very important after the North Carolina case, I think these are all important elements. And as the board stood with Ms. Pines, it just represented that balance like that. And I would like to see that balance continue, especially since we are looking towards the sunset review process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alejandra, for those of us that are very, very new to the board, will there be an opportunity for perhaps both nominees to make a statement?
Yes, we've had precedent for that in terms of having nominees' statements. I want to first, before we move forward with that as an option, to see if there's any other members who have any comments.
Ms. Pines, this is Dick Thorpe.
To give the two individuals an opportunity to just collect their thoughts for a moment.
Ms. Pines.
Yes.
Hi, thank you very much. And so I think this is a little bit, not only is a shock to Ms. Lawson, but a little bit of a shock to all of us.
Yeah.
That's made it a little bit, as Mr. Watkins has is wont to do, to make things interesting on the board. And I have to say that I know his heart is in the right place. And both, of course, Ms. Lawson and Dr. Lewis are excellent candidates. I think
Yes.
most of us we're not thinking about it in quite this way. So it's a little bit of a shock to all of it, at least to me, I know, as one of the relatively new members of the board. I've only been on the board for a year. And as has been pointed out, I've not yet been confirmed by the Senate, so maybe my voice really isn't actually as important as it should be. But I think the question really comes down to how do we represent? How does the board, especially in this special time? Dr. Lewis has the experience of being the vice chair on the of our vice president of the board and working closely with you and a number of issues, as Dr. Hawkins pointed out. The experience of being vice president it's important. It is also really, I think there is an issue of optics, and all the points that Mr. Watkins made are very, very well made. So I have to say I'm struggling a little bit right now to try and decide how to proceed. But I do know that we've had a process before. The idea of contested elections has not really been, at least I've not seen that before in my short time. So I'm just saying, I guess I'm just commenting that it's a little bit unsettling for me as well. So that's all.
No, I totally understand. And
It's Dr. Mahmood.
yes, so Dr. Mahmood, okay.
Yes. So first of all, I really applaud TJ for his bravery and his innovation and bringing this process to more clarity and transparency. I completely agree with the things he's saying, but I think every member of board should have a capability to be working on the whole executive committee. But I think the notion of that already preconceived idea that this person is going to be the vice president and he's going to become vice president, and nothing to, I am a big fan of Dr. Lewis and I'm not saying anything on his part. It should not be there, that everybody should be able to speak up and say who they think is going to be best positioned at this point to serve this board to protect the consumers and people of California. So I would say that I think this was a very crucial step and very right step in the right direction TJ has taken. TJ, I really applaud you on this thing.
Can I ask a relevant question?
Yes.
Again, it'd be different if I was in the room with everyone, because body language is important. But I would just ask Christine, does she know she was going to be nominated, and does she really want the position? I mean, Christine has skills. We know that, but I would like to ask the question. And
so here's what I've already asked that question, I think, when at the beginning. So I think now it's to move to each person making a statement. If there's no other comments, questions at this point, to make a statement, then I'll go to public comments. And then we'll come back And if you have anything additional to say, I will say that Ron has been serving with me for the last couple of years as vice president. He is well prepared to take this role. He has been involved in Sunset. He knows all of the issues. He's been actively contributing in that way. Ms. Lawson is brilliant. We all know that. She has a major leadership role in the organization that she runs. We are confident in her abilities as well. So what I like to do is to have each one make a statement. Dr. Lewis, I will start with you, as you were the first nominated.
Thank you. I'm not sure where to begin. I could always go back to the beginning of my start in the medical board in 2013, where I spearheaded the check up on your doctor program. I've been on all the board committees throughout the years. And as Denise mentioned, I've served as her vice president for, I think, the last 3 terms, probably, yes. And she and I, along with staff, have spent a lot of time preparing for Sunset, which is coming up soon. So from where I stand, I am very well and capable to lead the board in the process of Sunset, which is paramount at the moment for us to achieve. I also recognize, much to the negative comments from some of our public members, a public protection, public safety, and the consumer comes first. I know there were some negative comments about that, but there is no indication on my part or anything I've done in my career that would support that kind of attitude. So I'll just finish up by saying I am looking forward to taking this board through many directions that have already been started and also through Sunset. And I feel very capable, and I have the time now that I am retired. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
President Pines, did you want me to make a statement now?
I'm sorry, yes. I didn't realize I hit mute. Yes, please.
So for someone who likes to be extraordinarily well prepared to make statements, I have no prepared statement, of course. And I find myself in what for me is an extraordinarily uncomfortable position of being asked to lead this board, and also being, of course, a dear friend for all of these years of Ron Lewis. Now, as having been a leader of a variety of different organizations, from a city government to my own law firm, in part my leadership philosophy is to serve when asked to serve. So to the extent there was a hedge on whether or not I would accept this nomination, I do agree to accept the nomination to serve. And as I mentioned just in my previous remarks, there are, I think as a board that, and we've had this conversation a little bit, and I'd like to hear from the public on it as well, I think there's this question of whether we should continue to have a public member being, the public-facing leader of the board. And I think we should take into consideration what the balance of the leadership should be. So that's what, Denise, when I asked, could we talk about this in the context of a slate, right? Who is going to be in the leadership? I do think that we have an important process to go through this year with the sunset review process. I'm humbled, TJ, that you suggested my name and added it into the mix. And I appreciate that it has invited this conversation amongst the board. To the extent there's a concern about whether or not I would have availability, I'm available to, and have the time if that's a concern. But I guess I would encourage us to just continue to think about what the board needs from one of us during this sunset review process, and if the board needs a public member in that position, I would be willing to serve in this position.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back to the members one more time and see if there's any comments or questions of the nominees. And then I'm going to move to public comments.
So
I have a quick question.
Yes. Is that Ms. Lubiano, is that you? Yes,
yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
you can.
Okay,
Yes.
great. I just had a question about sunset because I've heard that it's come up that we have two people, traditionally it would be two people representing the board. Is that true? Is it only two, or could we have a full executive board up there to represent us?
It's just the vice president, the president, and the executive director. Those are the only presenters. And that's for all boards. That's for all boards.
Okay, thank you.
So my final comment, since I started this this play I started, as from experience on the sunset review, and especially remembering 2017 when I was in the room and I saw all these people coming out and just blowing negative comments left, right, and center at Dr. Gonadev and Denise. And it was nonstop. And then afterwards, having the panel go through their process, and Denise was great, and Dr. Gonadev was great. And when I'm thinking back and I'm saying, okay, so what if the same situation comes into this situation? Who's gonna be able to take the moment? And out of all of us, I said, okay, I've seen Ms. Pines in that position. The person that came closest to that was Ms. Lawson. And her legal background of dealing with, complex, difficult things, having her own law firm, and all of her experience just won me over. And when I chose to start this process, I was only thinking about the best people on my team. Who do I want to go out and bat and win? Because I know how important this is going to be. And I'm not saying that Ron could not pull it off. I'm saying that with Christina leading, I will have more confidence because there's just certain elements that she has, and it's a grace. It's just the way that she shows up, and there's a softness to that really appeals to the legislature. It's the same comments that was made towards Ms. Pines yesterday by other people on the board, from the public. And I just think that we have an opportunity right now, based on the experience that we have such a great panel to choose from, to choose Ms. Lawson, because I think she represents what we need to show at the sunset review and what the board needs to put a picture up for the public that we're accessible. So that's my final statement, and I didn't run for office. Thank you.
Okay. I also just want to say, Ron has held numerous leadership roles in the work that he does. He still works with the unions. leading numerous efforts there. So I know he didn't talk about his experience and what he does. And when he talked about his, made his statement, he was speaking specifically about his role and work here at the board, but he also has been a stellar leader in the medical community. So I don't want that to go without being said. So I'm now going to move to the public for public comment. Sean, can we move forward?
Yes, I've opened up the Q&A window. If anyone would like to make a public comment, please indicate so. First up, we have Eric Andrews. Eric, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
First, Howard, we have an abundance of evidence of doctors on the board protecting doctors. Look at Dev's first panel hearing where he helped his friend and coworker, Dr. Hari Reddy, a sexual assaulter, get his license back. So don't try to pull the wool over our eyes on that. Carrie has been quick to point out that the board has not officially adopted Robert's Rules of Order, even though the opposite is listed in the board's own manual. The tradition of the VP moving up to the president is tradition only. It is not in the board manual and is just a way for you all, things for you all to use to stroke each other. Come on, folks, this is a no-brainer. Ron Lewis representing the board at the Sunset Review will be an embarrassment. He couldn't even say the word president when he just accepted the nomination. Did you hear him? A number of people in the public have brought up the concern over his slurred speech, and frankly, he always sounds like he's high or drunk anymore. And Ron, I've got you on videotape being critical of our efforts. Remember the interested parties meetings? Imagine him having to be on the spot in front of the legislature. Also, isn't his term up in June? Christina's is good through 2022. Christina Lawson, even though she makes faces sometimes when I speak, is intelligent and well-spoken, and I would welcome her to represent the board at the Sunset Review. I also think she'll work for patient safety when Ron Lewis has made it clear that he will not. The executive positions on the board should be the most qualified for the duties, not whether it is a doctor or a public member. Having said that, your duty is to the public. And it's clear that a public member is going to take that more seriously than a doctor member since they have a bias. I would suggest this be done by secret ballot so as to not have any peer pressure change someone's vote. We all had to put our personal feelings aside in the recent election for a new U.S. president, and you need to do that now by not voting for tradition over just being smart. And Christina, I'm going to be counting on you to make real changes like TJ is doing. We know Ron won't do that. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Christina Hildebrand. Christina, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Please go ahead.
This is Christina Hildebrand with the Voice for Choice Advocacy, and I would second TJ's nomination. I think it's important as an advocacy group that the California Medical Board has a person that is not a doctor as their leadership. It's, having come to the meetings for years now, when there is a non-doctor as the president, things seem to, I still think there are a lot of issues, don't get me wrong, but things seem to be more patient-oriented versus doctor-oriented. And I think that's, given the mission of the California Medical Board and that it is consumer-driven, not doctor-driven, that is extremely important. And so I would ask that Christina Lawson be voted in to be the president. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next up, we have Michelle Montserrat Ramos. Michelle, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon. Michelle Montserrat Ramos, and I'm with Consumer Watchdog. I also would second Board Member Watkins' nomination as well. Board Member Pines, in response to your comments, I've spent 15 years advocating and monitoring this board. I was here long before you, and I will be here after you are gone. I became an advocate because the love of my life, a California political leader, died at the hands of a substance abusing physician, and the board did not investigate his case. Ms. Pines, I was the advocate who approached the board to initiate teleconferencing. You as a board did not accept my request. I approached the board many times. You as a board fought me all the way, but I was persistent along with my fellow California advocates, including Consumer Reports, and we pushed the issue through. And you finally adopted teleconferencing. and everyone, including the CMA, physician lobbyists, have actively used it. Now, you use my teleconferencing idea as one of your primary accomplishments, yet you tell me that I should try a different way of approaching the board. That is incredibly offensive that you would use my work and then question my advocacy. Secondly, the Patients' Right to Know Act, SB 1448. I spent 2 years lobbying the legislature for the Patients' Right to Know Act. And the third year, it was finally and successfully pushed through the legislature by Consumer Watchdog. My advocacy has brought many life-saving changes in legislation and policy to this board. My advocacy includes SB 1441, the Uniform Standards for Substance Abusing Healthcare Professionals. My advocacy has changed lives. Again, I find it highly offensive that my work, which the board has adopted in a number of ways, should be presented by you in such a negative manner. Your unkind words will not deter me. It will only cause me to organize more public stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Marion Hollingsworth. Marion, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Marion Hollingsworth. I'm a patient safety advocate. There's two issues I want to comment on. One is that why would any member of the medical board call out advocates to encourage us to back off from being critical of the board? Are you afraid of criticism for failing to adequately protect California consumers? When Ms. Pine said the board had SB 1448, the Patient's Right to Know bill, as a credit, this was wrong. We advocates pushed for it for 3 years, most of the time with the board being very much against it. It was only after the Larry Nassar and George Tyndall cases that you finally backed off and realized that you could no longer protect sexually offending doctors. 1448 is a win for the advocates and the people of California and not for the board. Also, I support Ms. Lawson for board president. We need a public member on the executive committee. Not only is Dr. Lewis's term up in June, but he has a history of supporting doctors over patient safety. In fact, he was said to have commented a few months ago that tragedies happen and you can't hang all the doctors. And I found that personally offensive and that it didn't adequately address the board's mission to protect the consumers of California. So I support Ms. Lawson for president. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I don't see any other requests in queue.
Okay. Ms. Codwell, please call the roll for vote.
Hi, this is Carrie. Can I suggest that you say the name of the person you're voting for when your name is called? And we'll take a tally.
Miss Birdie?
Did you call my name? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Miss Campoverde?
Christina Loss.
Dr. Gonadev?
Ron Lewis.
Dr. Hawkins?
Christina Lawson.
Dr. Kraus?
Ron Lewis.
Ms. Lawson?
Well, I was told never to vote against myself, so I guess I vote for myself. Christina Lawson.
Ms. Lubiano?
I just want to say that this is a very difficult decision for me. And I respect Dr. Lewis's years on the board and his experience. I respect that, the tradition where you've gained experience and along the way. But after today, I have to vote for Ms. Lawson.
Dr. Lewis?
Of course, myself.
Dr. Mahmood? Dr. Mahmood,
Christina Lawson,
Dr. Thorpe,
Christina Lawson.
Dr. Tirado,
Christina Lawson,
Mr. Watkins,
Christina Lawson,
Dr. Yip,
Ms. Lawson,
Ms. Pines.
Dr. Lewis. Can we have the tally?
We have 9 for Christina Lawson.
Okay.
4 for Dr. Lewis.
All right. Congratulations, Ms. Lawson. You have a big job ahead of you. We know you will serve the board well as president of the Medical Board of California. And we thank you for your service that you have so far and for the service that you will have as you move forward. Okay.